War. Our history takes on an air of inevitability. We've always used war throughout history to solve our problems when we can't come up with a better way. This cannot be accepted as an answer any longer, and it's time that it stop. People are waking up to this fact, and throughout history we've had many protests on war. Now, whether or not they've actually ended the wars or have had any impact whatsoever is negotiable, because it seems like our country's been at war for decades, and will continue to do so. Even after Obama said he was going to remove troops from Afghanistan, it has now been said that they will be kept through 2024 in Afghanistan. So the wars are not going to end. I was given a narrative and a short letter of resignation, and it reads as this. Early in 1991, President George H.W. Bush sent American troops into Iraq, presumably to liberate Kuwait from the control of Saddam Hussein. More likely, it was to assure American power in the oil-rich countries of the Middle East. The government had learned from the Vietnam experience that an anti-war movement must not have the time to develop, that U.S. casualties must be kept low, and that information about the war must be controlled. Information about the war must be controlled. A massive air attack quickly defeated the forces of Saddam Hussein. The American people were kept ignorant of the large numbers of casualties among Iraqi civilians. Nevertheless, the protest movement developed, and there were refusals among the military to participate in the war. A U.S. Navy Reserve corpsman named James Lawrence Harrington wrote a letter of resignation to his commander, and this is what it reads. There comes a time in life when maintaining silence is but a betrayal of one's own spiritual core of being. Such a time has come, and I must declare from the expansion of my heart and over the limited sphere of my mind that I am a conscientious objector and opposed to any and all wars. The power and command of my faith dictates that I work diligently and completely to stop war. To this end, I do dedicate the efforts of my life. I do not hold the absence of participation in a war as in itself peace. Through the power of the people, peace is an active force that can and must be spread to all nations, including our own. Our nation suffers from a deep malady in its consciousness that leads it down the path of continual violence and strife. I seek not only to stop this impending war in the Persian Gulf, but also to treat our own profound sickness. War is but a symptom of great concern. I prescribe the treatment of radical revolution within our nation from a thing of oriented society to a people-oriented society or community. We must learn to love and respect all people for the sake of divinity, the basic goodness that dwells within them. When we deny the people the right to exist and to self-determination, we are assuring our own self-destruction. In order to save my nation, and in order not to betray my own soul, I take this open stance of opposition to all wars. Sincerely, James Lawrence Harrington. Key points that were brought out in this that are really important was the mere fact that the U.S. casualties must be kept low and that information about the war must be controlled. Well, where do we hear about the wars? We hear them on the news. Mainstream media, MSN, CNN, Fox, corporations like that. It also says that nevertheless a protest movement must not be developed. It must not have the time to gain traction, to get the word out, to change the hearts and minds of people to where they're not going to support a war effort. Now, we just saw something like this with the Syrian conflict and the war that's going over there civilly, where it was thought that Assad had used chemical weapons against his own people. And our president now, Barack Obama, wanted to go in and strike. Upon further investigation, they found that it, in fact, wasn't Assad, and that it was rebel forces that used dirty bombs in their chemical attacks. You know, this whole thing with the media You have to really dig deep and figure out who's controlling the media and where that all stems from. I've watched so many videos today that my head is spinning. But one particular site I like to watch is a site called Storm Clouds Gathering, and they pretty much go down in history telling who owns what, who controls what, and why. And the media used Iraq propaganda, saying that they were hoarding weapons of mass destruction, and that was the reason why we were sent in there. Later in an interview, and I wish I could find the link and I wasn't able to, Bush admits that, well, we went into Iraq because we thought they had nuclear weapons, but then we weren't able to find them. So what was that war really about? Further reading, we talk about the information being kept from the American people and the propaganda that rolls with it. And this goes all the way back to World War I with the sinking of the Lusitania and the propaganda that was used against the Germans to force us into that conflict. And Hollywood also joins that same propaganda model, making movies depicting German men beating defenseless women, furthering the hatred of the German people and the war support. I find it interesting in my history book from a while back that this has been going on for a long time. And the creepy thing is that just recently, and I posted a link in my bibliography for this, that the propaganda ban in the United States has been lifted. And what does this mean? This means that mainstream media is scripted, and they can lie to you, and they're not going to tell you the truth about what's going on. Taken for granted, we just had a video come up from the Discovery Channel saying that we don't need to worry about Fukushima radiation. It's not going to do anything here, even though radiation is being picked up all over the country. And that's just one instance of the media controlling the information and lying to the people. I have some instances here in my book I want to show you on this propaganda. And like I said, it goes back to World War I, World War II, goes back to the Cold War. This, I don't know if how well you're going to be able to see this. That is a cartoon book that was put out by a religious affiliation, no doubt, back in 1945, depicting what America would look like should the communists take over. They commonly called that era the Red Scare. It's amazing to me how much religion plays into this propaganda part and lies to the people to get them to hate fellow people. And on that front, we skip along to 1957, and I'm sure everybody remembers or has an inkling of who Billy Graham was. He was a very popular TV evangelist, and even he preached that the Cold War was a holy war, and he labeled communism as the great sinister anti-Christian movement masterminded by Satan. Imagine preaching that over the TV and to millions of listeners that come to his revival tents and whatnot. This one was taking place in New York City to a crowd of 500,000 people. When you preach something so strong like that, imagine the support you can get. Imagine the hatred that you could foster. This also ties into my last video where I watched that video of that young black woman, and I can't recall her name, but it talked about the one story, the dangers of the one story. Think about the one story about communism and the USSR at the time. Now it's the Russian Federation because communism has fallen in that country. But imagine just reading that one story about communism, about Russian people. I don't know what was in that comic book, but I can't imagine it was anything good if it fostered fear of communism taking over in the country and possibly taking away our freedoms, our democracy. And it's the same thing with the German. The German movies from Hollywood and the propaganda there were depicting them as evil. Now, granted, don't get me wrong, what happened in Germany was evil, But not all Germans were like that, and many people suffered because Hitler lied to them and told them one thing to get their support and then did another thing. There's another instance in here with the sinking of the Lusitania. I'm going to try and show you the picture. This is another propaganda way where, there we go, that's better. This is an enlistment poster depicting a young woman and her mother sinking beneath the cold sea after the sinking of the Lusitania, which they blamed on Germany in 1915 to gain traction to get into that war, which they ended up doing in 1917. So you can see with this letter, men and women of this country, they're told that we're fighting for freedom, we're fighting for democracy, we're fighting for our way of life here. When in all actuality, we're not. It goes much deeper than that. And to get into all the things that I believe we go to war for, we touch upon conspiracy theories, even though it's well documented. And I really don't want to go down that road. But what happens with this letter is, and I believe that's true for a lot of people, is that they're told they're fighting for one thing, and then once they enter a war, they go to another country and they see what's going on, and it's an eye-opener. And then there's a moral struggle between good and bad in their heart. And they decide that they don't want to do it anymore. And that's what this letter of resignation is. He decided that morally it was wrong. I'll post some links underneath this so you can research some things and make your own decisions. Thanks.